Yeah, it's a pleasure and an honour to sort of be opening this very special conference surrounded by lots of great people. But you're all going to die. We're all going to die. Hopefully not today, hopefully not over the weekend, hopefully not for a long, long time, but none of us are getting out of here alive. Are we doing anything, or are we doing enough to sort of prepare for our death, our dying? Death has become, in the Western world, it's become a societal sort of taboo that we rarely talk about, let alone plan for. So modern medicine is very good at keeping us alive, very good. We've come on leaps and bounds, but dying, it's not so good at in dealing with death. It's seen as a medical failure, and we've kind of regressed as a culture in the society around death. Like, death used to be a much more sort of common sort of thing as a part of our life, just going back not far back in time, where now it tends to be sort of hidden away, and we don't die well in the Western world. We sort of, because we don't think about it, we don't plan for it, we don't prepare for it. When it does happen, people die often in severe existential distress, which is horrible for them and their loved ones. The World Health Organization has identified addressing this existential anxiety as one of its key things it wants to focus on. And yeah, it doesn't have to be this way. And what I want to get across in this talk is that a simulated dying before dying experience can be immensely therapeutic, not just for our inevitable dying, but for our lives as well. So psychedelics have a very special role to play here. They're unique in their ability to sort of affect long-term change in personality and outlook and well-being. A single dose can last for many months, and there's nothing else like this in medicine or psychiatry. And there's nothing else in medicine or psychiatry that we can use for treating existential anxiety and fear of death. So psychedelics have a very unique and special role to play here, and they have this ability to sort of induce these transpersonal experiences where people feel like they've gone beyond their body, and this seems to be part of the therapeutic aspect. So just going back in time, looking at some of the history of this, like Iboga is an interesting case. The Briti and other groups in Central Africa use a very, very large dose, an initiatory dose of Iboga, once in their lifetime. And that's essentially, it's a simulated near-death experience, and the sort of the aim of that is to sort of go outside the body and gain wisdom and knowledge from the ancestors and bring it back to live a better life. And interesting, one of the aspects of Iboga that's also crops up a lot with near-death experiences is this experience of being in someone else's body and feeling how your emotions how you have affected them from their point of view. And it's something interesting that's shared between both things. So looking at the history, the great Aldous Huxley was one of the first sort of people to kind of like identify psychedelics as having this potential role for treating existential angst. And he sort of thought LSD could be used to sort of aid in terminal cancer cases. And yeah, he didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. And on his deathbed, his wife Laura injected him with 200 microgram doses of LSD, and his wife said he died a very peaceful, very serene, beautiful death. So just looking at some of the studies that have come out recently, it's still very early days, but there's some interesting stuff going on. So this is a study from a few years ago by Peter Gasser, and it's using LSD to treat terminal cancer, terminally ill people. And yeah, we can see here long-term benefits, so up to a year after a single session. and this sort of marked reduction in anxiety and rise in quality of life. And we can see these effects mirrored quite closely with the psilocybin research being done. Again, safe, sort of non-toxic, physiologically well tolerated, no adverse events, and this long-term reduction in anxiety and improvement in moods. And some of the more sort of recent research that's come out from Johns Hopkins and New York University to follow, yeah, again, very marked reductions in depression, anxiety at 6 months after dosing, increased quality of life, life meaning, optimism, yeah, improved moods, relationships, spirituality. And it seems from both these studies, it's the mystical experience that psilocybin can catalyse. That seems to be a key part of its therapy, in terms of its long-term effects and in terms of its effects on reducing anxieties around death. And this is another potential, this is sort of also very recent, a potential application for psychedelics is the treatment of rational suicide in the elderly. So improving the mental well-being and outlook of the elderly, giving them more sort of life meaning and sort of, reducing their anxiety and fear when it comes to death. So just to look quickly at some of the accounts that have come out of this research, and I just wanted to get across these experiences are very powerful and they're very transformative. Like people, you don't need to have any spiritual or religious inclinations at all to be very powerfully moved by these experiences. They go very deep, as you can see here from some of the accounts. And including, like, William Richards is one of the pioneering scientists behind this work, and sort of you can see even he's sort of saying how deeply transformative these experiences are with psilocybin. And again, just to quickly look at sort of why this mystical experience that's catalysed by psilocybin, by psychedelics, is important. It sort of has a variety of effects, but sort of, this sense of connectedness and unity. It enhances relationships, family and loved ones, which is obviously very important when we've not got much time left. To live life fully. And although this is we're only looking at terminally ill people now, like, I think an important point, Roland Griffiths makes is, like, we're all terminal, we're all dealing with death. So in the future this will be too important to limit to sick people. So a special case, I think, is worthy of more attention, is 5-methoxy-DMT. So 5-methoxy has been nicknamed the God molecule. It's an endogenous compound, like its cousin, DMT, found in humans, and also in the defensive secretions of this one particular toad, Bufo, or now, as it's now known, Encilius alvarius toad. It's a phenomenally powerful substance. It's got to be at least an order of magnitude or more beyond the other classical psychedelics. So it needs careful handling, but there is great potential there. At the culmination of Strassman's DMT research, he didn't find actually that much long-term evidence of DMT's long-term therapeutic effects. People were having these really amazing experiences, but it wasn't carrying over much into their lives. And I think 5-MeO-DMT is quite different. I mean, like, there's been barely any science. Like, one of my friends here is going to be talking about one of the studies that's been done, but there's been barely any research on 5-MeO. But anecdotally, it seems it's very powerful at sort of treating trauma, addiction, depression. I think it's got much more long-term therapeutic sort of value than DMT. But 85% of people, this is just a retrospective study from a treatment provider, 85% of people reporting this mystical transcendental experience, which, as mentioned, that seems to be the core sort of therapeutic point of these experiences. That's where much of the therapy, especially the long-term therapy, is occurring. And then 60% experience some form of death or dying as well, and that's double what's been observed in the psilocybin research at Johns Hopkins. It's interesting to sort of note psychotherapist Stan Groff's research. He found treating some of his patients with psychedelics, particularly LSD, he was finding some of those people, terminal cancer patients, went on to have near-death experiences, and they said their psychedelic experience was very good experiential training for those states, which they said were very similar, and they said they were invaluable experiences for going into dying. So I thought I'd just follow this up. This is not in any way like rigorous, but there's a group on Facebook devoted to near-death experiences, so I asked them, who of you here has had a psychedelic experience and a near-death experience? How would you compare them? And like a minority say they're sort of, well, they gain value from both and say there's a lot of similarities, but the general consensus is that the near-death experience is of a much greater order of experience, very much sort of razor-sharp clarity compared to the psychedelic experience, which is considered to be more dreamlike and fleeting in effect. And then, yeah, some of the interesting these are all very different experiences. So we can see there's a 5-neo DMT account, a near-death experience account, darkness retreat, so the person spent 2 weeks in darkness, and then an account of a yogic Kundalini awakening. And to me, it sounds like they're pretty much all describing the same thing. They've just got there through different means. This sense of encountering this and becoming one with this great light, encountering infinity, eternity, a sense of cosmic homecoming, an incredible bliss and ecstasy. And it seems like this is something like a core, universal, human, transcendent or mystical experience, and various different sort of paths can get you to the same place. So yeah, this is just sort of a comparison of some of the personality changes produced by near-death experience and psychedelics. This is in no way statistically rigorous, like there's not actually been much comparative research between them, but both are known to cause these quantum shifts in human personality. But as you can see, like the near-death experience it's much more comprehensive and much more robust in the effects it has. And these effects, the after effects, tend to be sort of long-term as well. They'll sort of last or get stronger over time following the experience, which is interesting. But there is some interesting parallels. The increased well-being, life satisfaction, sense of life purpose and meaning, both very strongly sort of reported with both. And also the increased hunger for knowledge seems to be a sort of predominating thing with both experiences. Yeah, and an interesting recently published study, sort of building on the research of Dr. Kenneth Rinn, who's an sort of foremost expert on near-death experiences, and it's kind of validating some of his research. And it was finding people who read about near-death experiences tend to sort of take on board the psychological changes they're reading about. And he uses this term of benign virus. It's like a beneficially contagious mental thing. And yeah, like what near-death experiences are and how they occur sort of falls outside this talk. There's many scientific explanations for how they occur and why. There's no scientific explanation yet that can explain all facets of a near-death experience. It's something to keep in mind. It's still quite a mysterious phenomenon, but an important point Kenneth Rinn makes is whatever the nature of NDEs may be, there is no doubt they're really in their effects on people's lives. And William James sort of echoed this a century ago, saying mystical experiences should not be judged on their veracity, but on their fruits. And yeah, if you want to sort of catch the benign virus yourself, this would be the sort of book to go for. So it's a compilation of Kenneth Rinn's research, and he's been really thorough because he's trying to sort of engage the skeptical crowd, I guess. And just to touch on, like out-of-body experiences, as they're known, coined by this guy, Robert Monroe. So obviously near-death experiences sound great, but they obviously come with a certain amount of risk in that you tend to be near death to have it. So it's a little bit risky. Psychedelics obviously are great, but there's sort of legal implications for using them. So the out-of-body experience seems to share a lot of common ground with the near-death experience. And it's something that can be learned. It's a skill that can be learned. And it seems like a lot of people, and otherwise rational, skeptical people, come to sort of have a very different view on consciousness and how it relates to the brain after going deep with these experiences. So yeah, just some brief ideas in terms of like for the future, and like a sort of idea for a psychedelic hospice in terms of, yeah, so obviously we all know about the whole set and setting is very important, and the need for having skilled, experienced therapists on hand. But it seems like the TIC5, the DMT and psilocybin, I think, are sort of standing out as things that could be very useful in this regard. A thing I sort of should have mentioned about 5-neo-DMT is like LSD and psilocybin, they last a long time. You know, they're quite taxing on sort of the treatment providers, like who've got to be there. The 5-methoxy-DMT, you can have probably one of the most profound experiences a human can maybe have in a very short, condensed time. So I think it's got a good role to play. There's a very good cost-benefit ratio going on there. And then psilocybin is great because it's kind of very non-toxic, very well tolerated, suitable for terminally ill people. And another thing that's could be an interesting idea is having shared family sessions. This is something Dennis McKenna mentioned in some of his work with ayahuasca. Is so the Mazatec in Mexico, they do consume mushrooms in family groups. And so it's not actually that strange, but it's like people's armour comes down when they're sort of in the psychedelic state on psilocybin, and it facilitates communication. And so if you were in a family setting and you had one of your family members who's dying and you're all sharing that experience, it might allow you to say things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to say. And when they're dead and gone, they're gone. So I think it could be really cathartic, sort of going into the future. There's something to think about. So yeah, there's just a few little tips just to sort of maybe better prepare for the inevitable. Like, you know, like let's break the taboo of death that we have. Like, talk about it, think about it, prepare for it. Like, it's not going to go away. Like, sort of embrace it. It's a part of life. Yeah, read up on near-death experiences with an open mind, and maybe, yeah, catch the benign virus. Like, you know, it doesn't really matter if they're illusionary. Like, if it makes you a more compassionate, loving, empathic, ecologically aware person, who cares? Yeah, practice, if it floats your boat, sort of practice the art of lucid projection, OBEs, and obviously psychedelics in a therapeutic setting or a hospice environment. Yeah. So yeah, one of the key things is these experiences, they don't just help prepare for dying, like they've got a lot to teach us about life. And I think this is really beautifully crystallised in this quote from Rick Doblin. Even if nothing lasts and everything is lost, there is still the intrinsic value in the moment. The present moment, ultimately, is more than enough, a gift of grace and unfathomable value, which our friend and lover death hates in stark relief. Thank you.